these films screened in your school for the last couple of years. I'm not sure if this is the first time you guys took part, and having the filmmakers on site. What are your reactions to today?
Well, I think first of all, from like a ubiquitous perspective about Canadian film, I think in this festival to some extent, and certainly within Canada, we value Canadian film tremendously, but we sometimes seem to take a precedent over Canadian content over quality. So we look at films like 1 Week, which is being shown here, which I frankly think is a piece of shit. And we say it's good because this movie is Canadian. Well, I say the fact that it's a piece of shit ought to take precedent.
And I think often there's this sort of, which I think is a big problem, there's this sort of mindset about these like small independent, like very stereotypical independent films rather than actually artistic ones. And it like sort of like these films that are very much independent Canada with a capital C. I think it's part of one of the big problems. Like, and as well with this program itself, I don't agree with partly with some of the choices of film. Let's say, and I think in a way how we have to make Canadian film take a precedent over other things and show that we need to show Canadian film like this may be a problem in itself, because it is really just saying that we have this problem. I think, for example, like this film that was just shown, Prom Night in Mississippi, I do not think that was the greatest choice. I don't think it was a very pretty Canadian film, and I don't think it was of a very high quality either. But nevertheless, for example, I always question why I never see something by, let's say, Adam McGoyan here, or let's say by Guy Maddin.
They do show Agoyan films, but I haven't seen a Maddin one.
Well, no, but not.
Oh, you mean at your school?
Yeah,
you'd like to see
yeah,
stuff from our more successful commercial directors then, or just do you find Agoyan stuff? You're saying you find that more definitively Canadian for some reason?
Maybe not, but I don't think it's not so much even just the Canadian thing. I think those are superior films, and that is what counts. But anyway, I think Guy Maddin's My Winnipeg, for example, that is a great and quintessentially Canadian film. I don't think the quintessentially Canadian thing should have that much of a mark on it, but it is a film that has that and is also an outstanding picture.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
What you guys said about how they choose Canadian over quality, but I sort of have to disagree because we just saw a movie called Prom Night in Mississippi, and that's obviously not, I mean, even though it's made by a Canadian filmmaker, they obviously saw it was good enough that even though it was about the United States, it was still worthy of a Canadian film festival trying to promote Canada.
Well, I think the only reason we have this movie in here is because the director is Canadian. Well, it's an American subject, so it doesn't really matter whether the director is Canadian or not. And we just say, well, he's Canadian, so let's put the movie in there. Let's show it as Canadian content. Canadian film, it doesn't matter if the director or actors are Canadian or American. But if you want to show a Canadian film, show a film about Canadian mentality, something that helps us to understand ourselves as Canadians. So Guy Maddin's My Winnipeg, for example, or Adam McGoyan's The Sweet Hereafter. I think these are quintessentially Canadian films. Even if the cast may not be completely Canadian, if it has something to do with the Canadian mentality, that should take precedent over the origin of the director and the cast.
I personally, I feel that this film was shown for a reason of accessibility. It was, to me, like it was almost an anonymous film. Like how it was made was completely workmanlike. Whereas with a director, let's say like Adam McGoyan or Guy Maddin, those are completely unique visionaries, and that's what makes them part of what makes them special.
I think it's just a lot of it. I mean, if we're showing a movie because the director is Canadian or because the topic is Canadian or because, you know, watching the movie makes you feel more Canadian, it just depends, why is this film festival, why is Real Canada doing this? Why are they showing these why are they showing these movies to kids in a high school? And so you just got to figure out what your mission statement is, right? And if you want to show kids that, oh, you can be a director too, look at this Canadian guy, now he's a famous director, then you'll show a movie with a Canadian director. If you want to say, hey kid, you got to feel like a Canadian, then they'll show a movie like 1 Week where the kid will actually feel Canadian.